Hello and welcome to our exciting new episode of Talking About Stoicism. And I thought what I would do today was talk a little bit about a statement that I read a couple days ago. I was reading, there's no point showing you this, just a Loeb Classical Library. I was reading a bit in the Lives of Eminent Philosophers by Diogenes Laertius. And it's an interesting book. If you're unfamiliar with it, I think it's two parts actually. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's what the title suggests. It's an overview of sort of a biography of great philosophers up to the time that Diogenes Laertius lived, right? And it's fascinating because he refers to Stoic books, scrolls, that are lost over time. So it's kind of interesting. So he gives a summary not just of specific philosophers' lives, but also, of course, more importantly, their philosophy and what it's about. So he gives a nice, I would say succinct, it's not necessarily succinct, but an overview of a specific philosophical school, including Stoicism. And he starts off, as you would expect, with an overview of the life of Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism. And then he goes on to talk about all the different things that Zeno has said and that he read and that he wrote, that sort of stuff. And one of the things that I found fascinating, and that seems to have clawed its way into public media, because you sometimes see this quote. I have certainly seen this quote show up on Instagram posts and things that have nothing to do with Stoicism. But Laertius quotes Zeno as saying, "We have two ears, but only one mouth." And I thought it would be worth talking about that. And yes, we will also return to Seneca and finish his 4,000 letters, but this was an interesting saying that I sometimes forget about, and every time I reread it, I think, that's actually a really vivid way of expressing a certain thought. Namely, you have two ears, one mouth, so listen twice as much as you speak. And we forget about this all the time. I think everyone is in love, at least a little bit, with the sound of their own voice. Some people certainly more than others. That's why they enter politics. But everyone has that to an extent. Everybody likes to talk or likes to hear themselves talk. I think it's human nature. We think we should talk, or we should explain everything, or we should do this. I mean, I'm doing it now, so the irony does not escape me, trust me. But it's an interesting saying, and I think it's good homework. So for me, I know this video is a little later than the Stoic videos usually are, but for me, this is my homework for next week. I'm going to try to listen twice as much as I speak. I think it's a very good Stoic exercise to subject yourself to once in a while. Because I've done this in the past, where I've tried to not speak so much, and it's revolutionary is an overused term, but it gives you a lot of very interesting insight in what you do. And it shows you how many things we say during a day that are not necessary. Oh, really? Oh, so interesting. It's not interesting. When people say, "That's really interesting," 9 out of 10 times, it is absolutely not interesting. It's anything but interesting, but we say that anyway. It's a filler, right? We say this. We use little words as fillers, that sort of stuff. But we say in general a lot of things that do not require being said. So when you realize that, when you start to try and let go of that a little bit, interesting things can happen. Because people talk. Here's something that I found that I think is very interesting. You can't get away with not saying anything during a conversation with another person, because then it becomes a monologue on the other person's behalf. Sometimes that works, but most of the time it doesn't work. But if you don't say something all the time, people talk more. Try it. Someone tells you something, and instead of you saying, "That's really interesting," you just look at them. You can smile, you can nod, and then more comes out. Fascinating. There's a whole school of psychotherapy that's based on that thought. Carl Rogers came up with that. Humanist psychotherapy. His famous strategy was the use of a very simple tool to get people to talk. He would do this. And then there's more. And then there's more. And then there's more. And he would also summarize what they said. But the whole point of humanist psychotherapy is that you as a therapist don't intervene. You don't diagnose someone. You don't analyze someone like what the Freudians would do, the psychoanalysts. They analyze everything you say. Rogerian or humanist psychotherapists don't. They just listen, okay. And then they summarize what you said. They don't judge it. They don't interpret it. They don't comment on it. They said, so what I'm hearing you say is that you had a lot of trouble today at work. And then someone starts to talk more. It's fascinating. Try it out. It's amazing how that works. Sometimes that's all enough. Sometimes instead of saying, "That's really interesting," you can give back what someone said. So what I'm hearing you say is that you feel pretty frustrated about all this. And they keep going. This is fascinating. Now, I don't think that that's the Stoic exercise necessarily, although it's very much worth trying. Especially if someone always comes with you with all their problems. Do that. Instead of you trying to solve it, feed it back to them for once and see what happens. It's a fascinating experiment. Anyway, as to the 2 ears, 1 mouth, as I said, that's what I'm going to try to do this week. I'm going to try to listen twice as much as I speak. And it takes some pressure off you. Because what often happens with a lot of people, I'm one of those people tell me something and then I try to solve the problem. It's been said that there's something that men do, right? They try to solve the problem, but I'm sure women do it too. I think it's a human nature thing. Maybe men do it a little more. It doesn't matter. What matters is, instead of putting that pressure on yourself, think about how maybe something is not yours to solve. Sometimes it absolutely is. If someone comes to you for advice, it would be very unpleasant if you would only say, then try to give advice to the best of your abilities. That would be a Stoic thing to do as well, because that's helping out other people. That's just being virtuous. But when it comes to nonsensical things, think of how many nonsensical conversations you have during a day that have no point, that serve no purpose, that don't add anything to anyone's life. You're just talking, whether it's gossiping or whether it's complaining. It makes no difference. So maybe listen more than you speak. Twice as much. Listening as you speak. And see what happens. And as I said, I've done it in the past and I found it to be a revelation to see how many useless things we say throughout the day. Things that do not matter. Things that people do not care about. Things that it's just useless. Instead of then saying something useless, just listen. I hear you. I see. It's fascinating. Fascinating bit of practice. That is what I will do. Let me know what you think about listening twice as much as you speak. I mean, I obviously can't do it in this video, because if I listen twice as much as I speak, it's going to be a silent video, isn't it? It's not going to work. Anyway, you get the point. Let me know what you think. If there's something you've tried in the past, how it's worked for you, I find that interesting to read. Thank you so much for watching. I will be again next week. More talk about Stoicism.